All right, joining me now from Tehran is Mostafa Khoshcheshm, a professor at the University of Applied Sciences in Tehran. And joining us from the Netherlands is Cyrus Shaeg, a professor of international history and politics at the Geneva Graduate Institute. Professor Khoshcheshm, we'll start with you. There are no tolls right now on the Strait of Hormuz, but I know that the Iranians and the Omanis are talking about some kind of service fee in the future. Look, the Americans have said very plainly that this is a non-starter for them. Is this an area that Iran is willing to compromise on at all?
Hello, and thanks for having me. No, not at all. According to the MOU, Iran is not going to charge service fees for 60 days, but after that, definitely Iran is going to do that. As a matter of fact, many Iranians, people, and many others are not satisfied even with this 60-day-long free of charge transit through the Strait of Hormuz, because it's going to establish a procedure here that was in place ever since the war started, actually, after the Strait of Hormuz was opened. This procedure and the new protocols for imposing Iranian management came into force, and now Iranians believe that this should continue in all aspects, including charging service fees for the next 60 days. But because Iranian officials have agreed to do so, I mean, to give an exemption for 60-day-long talks, they agreed to support the Iranian officials, but nobody is going to agree to that because that's part of the new protocols. The money, is not the real core of this issue. The point here is how to impose your new protocols in the region. So this is highly important to the Iranians, especially considering that the four prerequisites and confidence building measures that were to come into place by the United States to be put into practice, they have not been implemented in full yet. The first one being the Israeli withdrawal from occupied territories in Lebanon. That's why that such talks are going fragile.
So, Professor Shaeg, look, Iran is getting a lot out of this deal, but I take Professor Khoshcheshm's point that, look, things are maybe not exactly as they're supposed to be in the MOU at this moment, but there is supposed to be some $300 billion of investment into the Iranian economy. There's supposed to be unfrozen funds. I wonder if you think that it would be in Iran's best interest to accept no tolls on the Strait of Hormuz as a way to kind of build goodwill with the other side.
I would assume that the pragmatists and hardliners that together are calling the shots now in Tehran, that excludes the ultra-hardliners, people like Saeed Jalili, but that the pragmatists and hardliners would say, yes, it is in our interest, right? And the reason is, I don't think primarily financial in their mind. I would assume that the interest is principally political administrative. They would like to be able, through this new authority that they have created and that they're now continuing to sort of, negotiate with Oman, they would like to use this as a mechanism to improve and increase their role in the overall Gulf security architecture. The problem for them, of course, is that not everybody is in agreement. Most importantly, the UAE has a very big problem with this. I think here Oman will come in because Oman will probably be able to intermediary like in one way or another. But I do think that the Iranians will want to keep this. And I also think that there is a bigger picture here, if you allow me quickly to take a step back and say that, the Iranian approach here is one case in a larger spread, as it were, of other countries using economic measures for geopolitical, gains and pursuits. China, the United States has done this, last year, this year, again, rare earth minerals or tariffs, right? So there is a bigger context here that we need to be heedful of as well.
Professor Khoshcheshm, I want to ask you guys about the situation in Lebanon. There are obviously these talks going on in Washington right now between the Lebanese and the Israelis. The Israeli ambassador to the United States has described those talks as a train wreck, though there are other signs coming from Israel that they're actually being quite constructive. But the ambassador's complaint is that the goal no longer seems to be dismantling Hezbollah. And I wonder, Professor Khoshcheshm, whether you think it's even realistic or possible to dismantle or neutralize Hezbollah in any kind of meaningful way.
Before that, let me give you a note about the $300 billion that you just talked about. Nothing has been decided yet. As a matter of fact, there are 4 prerequisites for confidence building measures. Reopening the Strait of Hormuz comes in return for these 4 measures: removal of the blockade, giving Iran oil sanctions exemption, releasing Iranian assets, frozen assets, as well as the first and the most immediate one, according to the MOU, is peace in Lebanon. There should be a ceasefire and permanent peace, and then withdrawal of the Israeli forces from the region. As you could see, Iran's nuclear issue, war indemnity, $300 billion, that we don't really think that the United States is going to do that. That's why we think that there is not going to be, there is not a big chance for a final deal. Even if there is, they will be decided later, after these 4, according to the MOU. And this $300 billion, this is not war indemnity. We have been requesting war indemnity. $300 billion of investment means the other sides would also have its own benefits and shares in developing Iran. So that has completely different meaning from war indemnity that Iran is requesting. Now back to Lebanon. It's not at all realistic to think of dismantling Hezbollah. Hezbollah was once believed by Mossad and the Israeli army to be dead. Actually, nearly a year ago, when they reported that to the Knesset, to the parliament. But they were surprised, everyone was surprised in Israel and across the world when they found out that Hezbollah is waging fierce attacks, rocket attacks on them. So Hezbollah can defend itself. Iran is not going to agree to that, and there won't be any peace without Israeli withdrawal from occupied
Professor Khoshcheshm,
Lebanon. If it hasn't been
I take your point.
Hezbollah, there wouldn't have been a territorial integrity of Lebanon.
Yeah, I take your point that you don't think that Hezbollah can really be dismantled at this point. But Professor Shayag, look, we've talked a lot about U.S. pressure being put on the Israelis to try to tone down their military activities inside of Lebanon, take a softer touch. But I wonder if you think that the Iranians have done enough to do the same with Hezbollah, to contain Hezbollah's abilities in Lebanon.
Let me basically here answer from Israel's perspective. The answer definitely is no, right? But I think there also here is a bigger picture. And that is that in the last few months, it has started to dawn on more and more Israelis. And also, a realization has started to come, for officers and officials in Israel, that the 2.5-year long, forever war, in Hebrew, Milchemet Netzach, that, Israel has waged, since in late 2023 throughout the region, in actual fact, that this is simply not sustainable, neither politically nor actually domestically. Israeli society is under actually tremendous pressure. Even psychiatric diseases are going up. And so I think long term, it is clear to the Israelis that in one way or another, they will need to, take a very big step back out of Lebanon, perhaps even fully withdraw. And I think the real question is rather than the question you asked, right, is how much pressure will Trump be able to, and actually will he have to put on Netanyahu to actually do this? Right. Yeah. I think, Israel, of course, would want to have, Hezbollah fully dismantled, but it also understands now both, and you see this partly in deeds, but, mainly also in the rhetoric, that they're starting to slowly come off, this sort of, idea or this like maximalist demand. And I would basically end by saying that from 2006 to 23, there was a long-term, period of, really relative quiet, although Hezbollah was in southern Lebanon, which is not to say that they have to return, but that Hezbollah perhaps could be there in one way together with the Lebanese army, and Israel could still live with this.
Yeah. All right. Mostafa Khoshcheshm for us in Tehran and Cyrus Shayag for us in the Netherlands. We appreciate the insight from both of you. Thank you.